This is the new Cannondale Scalpel, and it's a little bit like its predecessor in that you know you're going to fly up the climbs on it. What you wouldn't expect from a cross-country race whip like this is that you're going to fly on the descents too. My name is Miles Kelsey, you're watching Bike Network, and this is the review of the 2021 Cannondale Scalpel. The development of this model began at the Montsanan World Cup almost 3 years ago. Cannondale's chief product guru, Scott Vogelman, asked the factory team to outline what they wanted out of the new bike. The answer was a bike which placed race performance as the principal issue. A bike which would get them gunning at full gas, never needing to hesitate, no matter what kind of untoward gnaw the track presented. Now, I've ridden the previous model Scalpel, and while it is indeed blindingly quick on the climbs, the head angle is in fact pretty steep, and the bike is also a little short for the gnarly conditions that XCN marathon racing often poses. But you can't just change one thing on a bike and expect it to be golden. As Scott Vogelman says, the bike is an ecosystem and nothing should be viewed or changed in isolation. Needless to say, the changes to this new Scalpel are wholesale. It truly is all new. So I've been riding this bike for about 3 weeks now. I've got a pretty good feel for it. So I'm going to take you through the tech and my take on how it impacts the ride feel. The new Scalpel is a 100mm 29er cross-country race machine with clearance for 2 large water bottles inside the main frame. Cannondale have moved away from the single pivot suspension system in favor of a 4-bar system with the introduction of a flex zone on the chainstays, which is now patented as FlexPivot. The shock is driven by a small link which is mounted to the C-tube. The leverage ratio on this bike is also more progressive. So what that means is as the bike moves deeper into its travel, the suspension becomes harder, offering more support. This also means the bike will be more sensitive on small bumps if set up correctly and offer better grip throughout the travel. Perhaps the biggest innovation on this bike is the FlexPivot, which is the unique carbon fiber chainstays which taper to a solid flat section near the rear axle. This shape offers about 6 or 7 degrees of vertical flex into the system, which negates the need for bearings and an actual pivot. It is a cleaner design which chomps some grams off of the bike and reduces maintenance. On the trail, you wouldn't notice or feel a single change in the way the bike rides, which you would be able to credit specifically to this FlexPivot. But I can tell you there is definitely a magic carpet ride feel and something special going on there. To that single crown lefty Ocho fork then. It is not new, but what an impressive fork it is. The Ocho employs a caged needle bearing system, and I can tell you the action is very smooth. Ride feel is ridiculously good. Even with the higher spring pressures I prefer, this fork is so supple and without any perceptible stiction. It has a very progressive feel which complements the leverage curve on the rear suspension and produces a well-balanced ride. Top marks to Cannondale, this Ocho is a million times better than the first lefty I rode a long time ago. Something I learned from racing all kinds of full suspension bikes for decades is the importance of getting the front and rear suspension balanced, or equal in damping characteristics if you like. If a bike is not balanced from a spring rate, compression, rebound and ramp point of view, it becomes very difficult to attack the trail. This is simply because there is no predictable platform underneath you to rely on for stability, traction and so on. In my opinion, this is what Cannondale have done so well on the Scalpel. The front and rear suspension is very well balanced. Talking about attacking the trail, let's have a look at the fit and geometry of the new Scalpel. At 1.74 meter, I opted for a medium, which although only has a 435mm reach, it feels pretty spacious. The fit for me is spot on and a large would be too big. Head angle on this new Scalpel has been shaved down by 1.5 degrees to 68. The C-tube angle is now 1 degree steeper to an on-trend 74, and the reach numbers through the size curves are around 10mm more than the previous iteration of this bike. The wheelbases are also 30mm longer, and the BB is just a tiny bit lower. Now, what the changes in the geometry really do for you on the trail is they just increase the distance between your hands and your feet when you're on the bike. It simply allows you to be in an attack position, whether you're climbing or descending. It also puts you in a more neutral position in the middle of the bike, between both wheels, which means the bike handles better everywhere. This model, the Scalpel 3, is a 75k bike with a frame, shock and hardware which weighs 2,160 grams. Out of interest, the top of the range Scalpel, the high mod Scalpel 1, is of a different grade carbon, and the frame, shock and hardware is about 250 grams lighter than this guy. There's nothing sketchy on the component list of the Scalpel 3. Shimano DL brakes, SLX shifter, XT derailleur and a 12-speed 1x system all perform without incident. The stand's crest rims are not too bulky at 364 grams each. The spokes are from the DD Swiss brand, and the rubber is Schwalbe's Racing Ray and Racing Ralph, which, although are pretty narrow from a volume point of view, the carcass actually held up. I've had no issues with flats. I really like the cockpit on this bike. The flattish 760mm bars have a lovely feel to them on climbs and descending, and the stem is correctly sized at 70mm. There are no shortcuts on the two contact points either. The ESI silicone grips are comfortable, and the Pro Logo Dimension saddle is, as good saddles should be, not noticeable. It is a pity that the stash kit, which is an integrated storage solution for things like multi-tools, pumps, CO2 canisters and plugs, does not come standard on this model, but the good news is it is retrofittable. It was interesting listening to the Cannondale factory team talk about the initial testing on this bike. They said they felt slower, although the clock said they were faster. And this is a sure sign of a bike which is more composed. Whilst I never did back-to-back testing with the old and new bike, it is very evident just how composed this bike is. I found I could charge into technical trails at trail bike-like pace without the Scalpel becoming unsettled. It rallies my local trails, which are quite technical, with relative ease. Of course, personally, I'd add a dropper post to this bike to make it more capable, but I completely understand that not all racetracks demand a dropper. My test bike weighs 11.9 and it's very quick on the climbs. I like the blow-off valve, which opens the suspension on any big hits when running the lockout. That's pretty neat. I like the grip the bike has in all conditions. The supple early portion of suspension travel delivers great grip in turns, on off cambers and when climbing on rough surfaces. To summarize, the previous iteration of the Scalpel is a great bike, but this model is a lot faster. It climbs like a rocket, descends like a bomber and rides more like a trail bike than an XC bike. I think it is going to be one of the best of 2021 and is a bike you should consider for racing or just to deliver that knockout blow when racing your mates. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, see you on the trails.